वेलकम टू आवर नेशन स्टेट डायलॉग सीरीज राष्ट्र राज्य संवाद श्रृंखला में आप सबका स्वागत है. I'm Dr. Geeta Kochar, moderator for today's discussion. Today we have a privilege to invite a noted scholar on Chinese foreign policy, Professor Zhu Zhiqun. He's currently a professor of political science and international relations and chair of international relations department at Bucknell University, United States of America. He's also a member of the National Committee on U.S.-China relations. He was Bucknell's inaugural director of the China Institute from 2013 to 2017 and MacArthur Chair in East Asian Politics 2008 to 2014. He previously taught at University of Bridgeport, Hamilton College, University of South California, Carolina, and Shanghai International Studies University. His works mainly focus on international relations theories, Chinese politics and foreign policy, East Asian political economy, and U.S. Asian relations. He's the author and editor of dozen books, including A Critical Decade, China's Foreign Policy 2008 to 2018, published in 2019, China's New Diplomacy, Rationale, Strategies and Significance, published in 2013, New Dynamics in East Asian Politics, Security, Political Economy and Society, published in 2012, The People's Republic of China, Internal and External Challenges, 2010, and U.S.-China Relations in the 21st Century, Power Transition and Peace, 2005, and many more. So welcome, Professor Zhu Zhiqun, to our show. As we see things from last year to this year, much has changed in the geopolitics of the world. In specific, the relationship of superpower with the rising power, the proposals of Belt and Road Pacific, China trade war, India-China tensions, all are in the limelight, while we are all undergoing a major human challenge, COVID-19 pandemics. We want to discuss all of these issues, but let me first start with the most important event that has changed certain presumptions and possibilities. With Joe Biden win in recent elections in the US, do you foresee any change in US-China relations? And how do you see the future of US-China relations unfolding?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Professor Kochar, and it's good to see you again. And thank you very much for inviting me to this dialogue. I'll be happy to share my views with you, with your audience. To get to your question about the election of Biden as the new president of the United States and how that will change US-China relations and by extension, international politics. I think, many people wish that with Biden as new president, perhaps US-China relations will improve and we'll live in a better world. But I think probably they will be disappointed. I think there are a number of reasons. First of all, the basic structure of the US-China relations remains the same, no matter who is in the White House. I think in the United States, there's a bipartisan consensus that China is the long-term biggest threat to the US global dominance. So no matter who is the new president, he or she will have to be tough on China. So in terms of strategies towards China, maybe Biden will be less confrontational than Trump, but don't expect a major improvement in the relationship. That's the first reason. Number two, I think we have to understand that Biden's priority will be on domestic issues. We all know that the United States is leading the world in terms of the COVID-19 cases and the death. I think now over 300,000 people have died of COVID-19. So I think it's his priority to try to control the virus, make sure that this health crisis will be over as soon as possible. And then, of course, he also needs to focus on the economic recovery, and also bring the divided nation together. Because as you know, the United States is very divided, politically, ethnically, and racially. So he has a lot of challenges facing him on the domestic front. Foreign policy will not be his priority, and US-China relations obviously will be something that he has to take care of later, not anytime soon.
In some sense, I agree, that like the foreign policy is not going to change, in the sense the US approach towards China is not really going to change, because there is a bipartisan consensus in US. across the parties that, China is the major threat. It's a rising power. It is really challenging the US supremacy. But having said that, I mean, things are changing also in different manner, in the sense there's a lot of talk about the G2, while many developing countries are also coming, in specific India, have been calling for a multipolar world order. So I think there would be a lot of changes in terms of, as you're saying, Joe Biden will not be really focusing on foreign policy. But in your opinion, what challenges and possibilities exist in the changing scenario?
Well, as I said, I think Biden may take a less confrontation approach towards China. I think, he will seek some cooperation with China on certain issues, especially climate change, global health, and maybe nuclear denuclearization in North Korea, those kind of issues. He will seek cooperation with China. But I think competition will be the main theme of this relationship. I mean, in the past, that this relationship has always been marked by both competition and cooperation. But in the past, there was more cooperation than competition. But since about 2010, I think there has been more competition than cooperation. And of course, Trump, took a confrontation approach. So you see more confrontation in the relationship. But I think moving ahead, Biden probably will try to restore the traditional approach towards China. That is, working with China as possible in areas that they do share common interests, but tough towards China on many areas that they perceive China will pose a serious challenge towards the United States. Now, regarding G2, I think, G2 was a concept first proposed by this economist. I think his name is Fred Bergenstein, in 2005. I think it was a premature concept. It is not a reality. It will not become a reality anytime soon, I think. It was kind of endorsed and expanded by a few scholars and former government officials, like historian Neil Ferguson and former US State Department official and World Bank president Robert Zoellick, those folks who really promoted this idea of G2, China, United States as two largest power working together to combat global challenges. But again, I think this is a wishful thinking. I don't think, either the United States government or the Chinese government actually officially endorsed this idea. In fact, I think that actually China and India have common interest here. I think China regards itself as the largest developing nation, and India is also a large developing nation. I think both nations prefer a multilateral international system, not just a unilateral dominated by the United States, or the so-called G2 just dominated by China or United States. I don't think China wants to do that. So actually, there are many common interests actually between China and India. Now, under President Trump, of course, the United States abandoned much of multilateralism and withdrew from international organizations. So that hurt America's international image, and that also hurt multilateral cooperation. And I expect that under President Biden, the United States will kind of restore its global leadership and play a leadership role in promoting multilateral cooperation with countries like China, India, EU countries, Russia and Japan. So again, I don't think G2 is something that has become a reality or will become a reality anytime soon. I don't think India needs to worry about it because the so-called G2 includes China and the United States, not including India. In fact, China and India actually can work together to promote this multilateral new international system in which both India and China can play a very positive role.
I mean, you just pointed about the competition and cooperation between US and China, but I think that is the case between India and China as well. I mean, over and above, we see from past to now, I mean, after 62 war, I'm talking about, there has been always sometimes competition, sometimes, cooperation. Of course, when Prime Minister Modi came to power, there was signs of a lot of cooperation rather than any competition or confrontation. But as we see now, India and China are having a long standoff at the border. So what do you think were the reasons behind China's move, and what has changed under President Xi Jinping's regime that has resulted in this deadlock? And so, I mean, the kind of things that you're saying, India and China should not be worried about it. These things are quite worrisome for the people who are in India, and there are a lot of debates over that. So how do you see that?
Yeah, I understand there are a lot of debates in India and also a lot of debates in China, actually. So if you ask a group of Indian scholars, India officials, or a group of Chinese officials and Chinese scholars, most likely are going to blame each other for the problems. I think that's not constructive, of course. I always think that it's very unfortunate that this great relationship has deteriorated in the past few years, especially. I mean, the wonderful days of Hindi, Chindi, Bahai, those days are over. Very unfortunate. And through the long history of interactions, India and China actually learned from each other through these mutual learning, mutual interactions. So what you see now is abnormal, from a historical perspective, and it's very unfortunate that this mutual respect has turned into a mutual distrust right now. They don't trust each other, and of course on both sides, they can come up with a long list of complaints about each other's activities. So you ask what happened, under Xi Jinping. A lot of things happened, I mean, many people believe that China has become more aggressive in its foreign policy, but I think it's, to be fair, it takes two to tango, I think, both sides are to blame for the current situation, I would argue, For example, India points out that China, through its Belt Road Initiative, strengthened its relations with Pakistan and expanded its influence to the South Asia region, which is supposed to be India's sphere of influence. And even today, China refuses to support India's membership in the nuclear suppliers group, which really is irritating to India. Long list, of course, And of course, the Chinese side can also come up with a list of what India has done, to irritate the Chinese. For example, India has actively participated in the Quad security dialogue with the United States, Australia and Japan, right? And India has also joined these other powers in the South China Sea. And India recently banned hundreds of Chinese apps, So again, the list from both sides are pretty long, But again, that doesn't help to solve the problem. I think, to be realistic, I think both sides need to reset this relationship and focus on the positive, focus on the common denominator. I think the biggest common denominator between India and China is that both are large developing nations, and they need time to develop domestically, and they need each other to help each other actually to promote growth together. So that's my proposal, for India and China. I think, for the border issue you mentioned, it's very complicated. There's no easy solution. I mean, these border conflicts will continue, in the years ahead, and neither side is willing to yield. So it's going to be dangerous. So how can we move ahead? I would argue that maybe instead of thinking of this border issue from a traditional territorial perspective, maybe they can think out of the box. Maybe India and China can maybe turn that area, the disputed area, into some sort of a demilitarized zone, withdrawing troops, pulling back troops, maybe 20 miles from both sides, and turn that area into maybe some sort of a natural conservation area. So that way, the two troops, two militaries will not stay so physically close to each other and can avoid physical contact. They can still have differences, but they do, as I said, they do have common interests in promoting peace and development And that is the biggest interest of both countries. And I don't see that happening, which is very unfortunate. I hope that people on both sides, India and China, can think out of the box and really focus on the positive, focus on what is the biggest challenge for both sides. I don't think it's a border clash. I don't think it's the a difference on Belt and Road Initiative or the Quad. I think the biggest common denominator, is growth, domestic development. That's something both countries can definitely work together.
No, I mean, you rightly said, but I think at the highest political level, both in India and China, there is an interest that, things should not escalate. And both sides are really working hard to de-escalate the tension. Somehow we are able to manage this standoff for so long. Definitely nobody wants to see this standoff to continue for a long period of time. But the choices seem to be quite limited as of now, unless until there is a proper understanding. There is a talk about either defining the lack, which has not happened as yet, or something a little more further to it. But you just mentioned about Quad and things like that. But the US has been pushing the Indo-Pacific, while China has been, as you rightly said, mooting the BRI. So how do you see this will impact the global changes as well as the changes in the Asian region?
Yeah, so you're right. So many of the problems in Asia or between India and China can be perceived or analyzed in the broad context of U.S.-China rivalry, actually. So yes, you're right. So United States has been pushing for this so-called Indo-Pacific strategy. So you have to ask, what's the objective? Is this policy inclusive and open to everybody? Or this policy is designed to contain China, to counter China's rise? I think the United States has to be very clear about it. If it's designed to counter China, then I have to argue that it's not going to work. And it will only create enemy out of China. And it will put other powers like India in a dilemma. Should India be part of the US strategy to counter China, right? And likewise, the Belt Road Initiative, I mean, we have heard about the many concerns, even debt issues, debt crisis in some countries involved. So I think China has to be more transparent. And also, we can also ask the question, what is the ultimate objective of this policy? Does China just want to benefit from it itself, or China will actually be able to help all these countries involved without creating all these tensions along the way, especially, for example, between China and India and the CPEC with Pakistan, a lot of issues. So my point is that this big power competition has raised tensions in the region and put a lot of regional countries in a dilemma. I think it's the responsibility of big powers, especially the United States and China, to clearly explain what their intentions are in the Asia-Pacific region. Instead of initiating all these policies that are potentially divisive, dividing nations, I think perhaps they should work together to bring these countries together to focus on common development. I think you see a lot of realist Cold War type of policy here, with different dividing countries into different camps. The Quad, the Indo-Pacific, and BRI to some extent. I think these two powers, United States and China, are walking on a separate path. But really, they need to work together. Going forward in the same direction and playing a leadership role in bringing all these other countries together. I don't see that happening, and again, that's very unfortunate. And I think that hopefully, the new president of the United States, Joe Biden, and maybe will do something different. But again, his hands are tied. His focus is on domestic issues, and I don't think this whole structure in the Asia-Pacific region will change anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things very relate to the other issues that I want to pose as a question to you, and maybe the last one, which is actually related to, the things which we're talking about in a larger context about defense alliances, 5G, cybersecurity. So all these are the defining factors for future bilateral as well as multilateral engagement. So in your opinion, how will these influence the global matrix?
Well, I think, especially high techs, will fundamentally change global politics in the future. And recently, especially regarding China's Huawei 5G network, many countries have been involved in this tech war between China and the United States. I think, this development of new technologies will make these traditional old concepts such as national sovereignty, defense alliances, obsolete and less relevant, actually. I would propose that we should focus on human security. I think human security is of more importance than these traditional concepts like defense alliance. The current pandemic is quite illustrative of the challenges, human security challenge we're facing now. I think instead of a defense alliance, which naturally divides nations into different camps, these big powers should focus on how to bring nations together to combat these global challenges to humanity, especially global health crisis, pandemics, climate change, even our mental health, in the rapidly changing world. Those are new. So these are new, non-traditional security challenges. I think the defense alliance you mentioned, is really for the old traditional security challenges. But these new non-traditional security challenges are not getting enough attention. And I think, in this multilateral world, all countries have a stake in dealing with new non-traditional human-related security challenges. I think big powers, especially United States, China, India, Russia, EU countries, must take leadership role to promote multilateral cooperation and handle all these challenges together. I mean, that's the right way to move forward.
Very well said. I mean, human security is one of the concerns which everyone should have across, nations, because the ultimate challenge for us is not just about fighting with each other, but how to protect each other. This should be the motive. So with those words, thank you very much, Professor Zhu Zhiqun, for your insights. It was indeed a great pleasure to hear you. Thank you all for watching our episode. We hope to continue our conversations. Keep watching and keep learning. Dhanyawad.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.